Be sure to check out mythvisionpodcast.com. Help MythVision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can also donate through PayPal and Cash App. Join the social media links down in the description. We have Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media. Help the community of MythVision grow. Hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you guys are notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Dr. Price, Joyce, are you serious? Comments on the video. I've noticed Joyce has commented a lot on my videos, but not only my videos. She seems to be a fan of Jason DaCosta, who obviously has recently talked crap about you and all the guys that I've had on here. But anyway, I digress. She says, I'm confused. Is Valliant an I.O. proponent? This is James Stevens Valliant, Creating Christ author, when he did the critical discussion with you on his theory. Is he an I.O. proponent? We're not even going to go into all that that means. But anyway, since his claim is this was written for the rebel Jews. Now, I don't know if he's actually saying that this is written for them, but as a reaction to
pacify them.
Right. I don't know if it's absolutely that or if he has shifted his topic to saying this is written to Jews in general as well, to try and pacify anyone that might be convinced of that type of ideology, or if it's written directly to them. I don't know, or in a response to them. What do Paul's Gentile converts have to do with pacifying Jews? How does he explain the imminent message of Israel's last days for salvation? Taken from James Stuart Russell's book, The Parousia, which you have on your shelf right there book that you've read. Great book. The gospel needed to go into all the world, and then the end would come. Paul states the gospel had gone into all the world, past tense. So what good is a religion with a message that was about to finish at the judgment of the temple, 70 AD? Derek, did you forget all your preterist understanding of the text? Now, I think, just to make a remark here, of course I haven't, and that's why I say it failed, and where it hasn't failed, it's spiritualized, because they purposely are trying to adjust for the failings of a literal imminent coming, or an imminent substantiating the prophecies that was supposed to happen, an actual kingdom, a real Yahweh coming and changing the earth. Well, that stuff didn't happen, so they are spiritualizing things, if that is the case. I mean, there's so many dynamics to this, but no, I haven't forgot my preterist understanding of the text. I think preterists mistakenly conclude things and say it did happen, unlike reality, and that's why they run to fiction now, a lot of these IOers, to try and solve these problems. But anyway, have you misunderstood your preterist text? So how does he reconcile this? We know that the preterist cannot reconcile the end with the logical reason to continue preaching a gospel for the messianic Jews after the judgment. End of all things, all prophecy. So remember, 70 AD. She is a full preterist in her thinking. He hasn't explained this. Why would first century rebel Jews be eager to identify with a blood-human sacrifice such as in Hebrews? They aren't given anything but a doctrine to expect their consolation after death in heaven, or by a physical rapture when all Israel will be saved. It's the proverbial carrot at the end of the stick. What is Valliant's thoughts about the esoteric astronomy in the text? And does he have any reason for why the text has so many contradicting messages? For example, Jesus upsets the temple merchants at the beginning of the ministry in John, but at the end of the ministry in Mark, contradiction, hint, hint, which neither would fly with the Jews at all. And by the way, Jason DaCosta doesn't permit contradictions. He's not open to these ideas. It's all one painted picture. Wouldn't the text just infuriate the Jews? When Jesus calls them brood of vipers? Maybe I'm not following his theory correctly. Is he claiming that a religion that blames the Jews for murdering their own Messiah is written by the Romans to pacify rebel Jews? Anyway, there's a lot there, Dr. Bob, to unpack, but I don't think we'll be able to unpack everything. But
well, he is... Well, I don't speak for Jim, and I'd be interested to hear his answers to these things, too. The notion of a heroic martyr who was then vindicated and whose sacrifice achieved salvation, I think that, though you can imagine some Jews saying, they're not going to get away with this, let's fight, and some may have. But on the other hand, if nobody heard about this until it was part of a gospel complex, this is how salvation came. And this is the kind of kingdom the one mentioned in the Sermon on the Mount, that we ought to strive for now. I can see Romans, not that I necessarily think they did, but I can see that as an alternative, pacifying Jews, spiritualizing the whole thing. That wouldn't be inconsistent with it, though you wouldn't necessarily have needed Roman invention. You could just say that given the Romans crushing the rebellions, Jews subsequent to that, some of them Jews who believed in Jesus, however they came to, had to change, like Reimarus and Brandon and others said, and make it into just a this worldly church kind of a thing, better than just disbanding it. And so they would have enough reason to pacify it and to deny the original rebel origins of it to avert persecution. As to the contradictions, those are real, though my contention, and I'm going to be writing a book about this called When Gospels Collide, my contention is that most of these contradictions are real contradictions, but they're not stupid mistakes. Why couldn't they keep it straight? No, what Bultmann said, and I think he has to be right, is that John is trying to make the whole gospel into one long passion narrative, so that Jesus is on trial all the way through it, hence all the talk about a witness for me, testimony, I'm testifying on my own, etc., etc. That's why the cleansing of the temple is put at the beginning, because that's what led to Jesus' trial and so forth. It's just expanding that artistically. It's theology in narrative form. He's not writing history per se, there or anyplace else in the Gospel of John. So it's not just a stupid mistake. Now, it's a different viewpoint. Well, I'm not even sure if that's true in that case, because it's just trying to make a point at greater length. But some of it is contradiction, and there's no way to harmonize it. But even there, you can usually see why it's been altered. Now, a fundamentalist isn't going to like that, because they want it simply to be straight history, but they're just demanding that it fit a stereotype that they prefer. I mean, you know how God wanted to write the Bible? Why didn't you write it then? I mean, if you know that much about God, you don't need the Bible. You're a prophet in your own right. I love that line in Inherit the Wind. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to the prophet from Nebraska. Let us have a book of Brady, Matthew Harrison Brady, the fundamentalist attorney. We shall slip you in neatly between Numbers and Deuteronomy. It's great. What a movie. Sorry. Okay. There certainly were different views expressed in the New Testament. It's not all uniform. You have, and you ought to realize that as soon as you start harmonizing. Well, let's interpret the less clear in light of the more clear. In other words, let's pretend the ones we don't like say the same thing as the ones we do like. You're just playing a game. Snap out of it.
That's actually, I have to interrupt you and say, that's exactly what I've witnessed time and time again. In fact, the proponents of such theories are actually saying, Derek, you don't want it to be cohesive. This is their agenda, their apologetics, if you will, is the Bible is a cohesive story. They think it's one story, that it all is a story. And I'm like, can we get a magnifying glass and look at the same book together? Because I don't think we're looking at the same text. They want to justify this passage, that passage. And I know that our friend here, Joyce, has seen this on Jason DaCosta and other I.O. videos. It is fundamentalism that is still carried over, even though they say don't believe in the book. Yeah,
that's the only reason one would believe in fundamentalism. Inerrancy and no contradiction is if you believed it was a divinely inspired book and that God wouldn't make such errors. And sometimes there are errors, but a lot of this stuff isn't. It's purposeful change in differences and so on. But it is just held, it's predicated on a belief they expressly reject. It's just all mixed up. As to the preterism thing, I really have a sympathy for the IO people, or as I would like to change it, call it only Israel, and then you could just refer to it as Oi. There is a point, as Reimarus put it hundreds of years ago, the only claim that Jesus made that could be verified or falsified was not what's going to happen when you get to heaven. You'll have to wait and find out. But the only one that you can actually put to the test is the world going to end in this generation? Take a look at the calendar. It didn't. The New Testament is filled with strained, lame, contrived attempts to explain that away. Because what choice did they have? It was either that or saying, well, this whole thing was one big mistake. Jesus was just another Harold Camping. Let's just go home like the Emmaus guys. And so they're right about that. That ought to have been enough to make us view Christianity per se like most of us do the Jehovah's Witnesses, who have been embarrassed the same way many times. So I agree with them. The whole thing just failed. It collapsed, and they won't, and others won't admit it. But their view inherited from Russell the only weakness in his book.
Grab your book. You might as well. It's right there.
Yeah.
So in case you're wondering, and I know a lot of people wonder if Dr. Price knows what full preterism is or knows the theory, he has literally read, and he totally understands. He's written about this book. So in case they want a straw man or something, I'm just pointing out, and I know that Joyce has been very, very generous and kind in the comment section, never being harsh, and I respect that, and I really value people like that.
Yeah, her questions are genuine. They're not gotcha kind of things.
No, and this is why I appreciate many of my friends that are still IO proponents are convinced that there's something to it. However, this full preterism thing, they cannot accept the failure concepts. They have to justify by using harmonious methods to make Paul say what the Gospels are saying, to say what Revelation's saying, and it's all the same thing. And one of the chiefs in that is Don K. Preston, who was a leading expert, if you will, full preterist, who is a Church of Christ member, and he harmonizes everything. Revelation means what Paul means, what John means, what the Gospels mean, what the epistles mean. They all harmonize.
This reminds me of a great cartoon in a book called The Bible, Now I Get It by Gerhard Lofink, which is like a popular handbook for form criticism. He's got these great cartoons throughout, and it shows a bunch of animals coming out of the ark, and Noah is guiding them into a huge sausage grinder. And when they come out, it's like parable, proverb, gospel, and all that. It's all homogenized into neat categories. And that's no way to treat the Bible. You don't want to feed it through a sausage grinder, and that's what harmonization does. Let's homogenize it and reduce it. You're just ruining the Bible. There's all kinds of stuff you are guaranteeing you will never understand. I always ask people, what do you think would be the way to go? Use a method that makes it impossible to solve problems? Oh, we'll find out when we get to heaven. Or a method that enables you to come up with good solutions here and now. I don't care what the implications are. I'm going with the latter.
Right.
And fundamentalism, they're cheating themselves. And these people have no reason to do that.
I want to take a step back, though, in this and say, you're not saying let's try to dissect the Bible just to dissect it because we don't want it to harmonize. You want to see where maybe something has a connection. You want to check and say, okay, well, that's why you do what you do with mimetic connections. That's why you do what you do with our good question earlier about looking to the Old Testament and seeing it rehashing concepts. I mean, it's there. We know that it's there. But to do everything like that and to act like Paul has the same exact eschatological view as the gospel authors or as Revelation or as, other texts, that is where I think they're presuming this already 27 New Testament book canon, as if these books all agree, when we know there's issues from Matthew to Paul. I mean, Matthew clearly doesn't agree with Paul. Yeah. If you can't see that much, I don't know how far you can go in this. But anyway, we're rabbit trailing off the topic, because I think the point is, and this goes into the vein of the whole Roman provenance position he's proposing, if this is written to Jews, how do we reconcile this in light of the Gentile mission? What does Paul have to do with that?
Well, actually, that fits in pretty darn well, because the more Gentiles climb aboard, the more you're going to dilute the Jewish nature of Christianity, which is exactly what happened. Because the Gentiles, I'm always saying, what would they have cared whether Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah any more than if you went to sent missionaries to Africa to say, good news, there's a new Prince of Liechtenstein. A new what? Who cares? I mean, even explain the whole thing. Get out of here. Why would it even be of interest? And so if Gentiles come in and dominate, if the nature of the whole thing is going to change, and guess what it did? It winds up a mystery religion. It winds up hand in hand with the state eventually. I mean, even if you don't go along with the idea that the Romans created it, eventually you have the same thing when Constantine comes about, and that's because there were so many Gentiles and assimilating Jews. So I don't think it's that tough to explain.
No, I don't think so. And I think it's becoming more complicated when we start to hear these I don't know, things I've never heard. So if it weren't for the personalities, Dr. Price, I think if we just had books written by people in the movement that are proponents of this position, just write your book, keep the personalities, the derogatory, anything like that out of it. I feel that it could be taken more seriously and maybe could be presented to people. Or if it's not a book and they want to jab themselves and say, we're not doing that for monetary gain or whatever, their own little supposed, I guess you'd say, they think they're being honorable and whatnot, not charging for a book, write a PDF. And then we can get the PDF out there and try and get it into circles. Then you can do what the scientific method is and see what people think of it, have it critically analyzed and checked, and see if you're off on some things, and be open-minded to adjusting to the improvements of criticisms. But I just don't see that happening.
Well, also, why don't they just cut to the chase and say the end was predicted for 70 or thereabouts and it didn't happen? End of story. They're still half into the apologetic thing that it's somehow still true. They have no reason to say that. Why don't you say Christianity has been debunked, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, I'd love that. The problem that I'm finding that's happening in the debate that I've been discussing, which I finally ended the conversation on Facebook and really have no interest in throwing stones, is that what they do is they're saying now, and these are only the Israel-only proponents of full preterism, that are saying, well, it's all just a fictional story, one story, a cohesive story, and it did end according to the story, and it did have its fulfillment, all quote-unquote Israel, which were the Gentiles too, fullness of the Gentiles, all Israel will be saved. Romans 11, the story ended where all Israel got saved, the elect, of course, the remnant, the chosen, the predestined, Calvinistic tendencies, where in the narrative, in the story, it did happen, and it was fulfilled. And therefore, really, you guys just are missing, this is just a fictional story like Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. And
that doesn't seem to fit together to me.
I know.
It sounds like they're saying Christianity is true, but it's over. Whereas they must, I gather, they don't think it was ever true.
But that's the point I'm making, is like, if it was never true to begin with and it is just a story, why would people have a religious movement based off of this story from the beginning? And when we know the composition of many of these letters that are written in the New Testament that they claim, hey, I.O., right here, New Testament, I.O., while those books are being established and written, you have non-Israelite movements of Gentiles in a movement that coexist while the supposed text is being written. There's so many issues. Anyway, I
They're just wasting everybody's time. The failure of the parousia. Can you take seriously the lame rationalizations that try to get out of that? No. I mean, this guy doesn't. In this book, what the heck's his name? I keep thinking Russell. He is so great when he repeatedly says, okay, here's what people say to try to evade the deadline set in the New Testament. Oh, well, Genea means race. This race will not pass away. He says, get out of here. And he gets indignant, and not insulting, but indignant. He says, you can't take that seriously. If you can do that kind of ventriloquism on the text, you could make it say anything. Let's get serious. Though his own solution seems to me implausible, but he's painted himself into a corner. But that's what is so refreshing about this book. He pulls no punches. He's just got the light right on you like an interrogation session. And you can tell he's someone who loves his Christian faith. But he can't, because of that, he can't lie to himself. Like, oh, he didn't really mean this and that. But neither can he give it up. There's cognitive dissonance. So he has to come up with his own contrivance at the end. It really did happen, but in the fog of war, and people didn't notice it. Well, that's not hard to believe. But you mean you're telling me Jesus did return already? And that's why I love this for the sake of mythicism, because it says about the second coming of Christ what we say about the first, that people simply surmised he must have come and we missed him. So I guess he lived back then, and what did he do? Well, let's take a look at the Bible, the Old Testament, and see what he must have done and write up the stories, because that's what they're doing with the second coming.
Interesting. So I guess I need to do a video having James answer some of his particular questions from himself, but addressing the did I forget my preterist?
I'm
stuff?
Sure he's ready for it, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely haven't. I do see that they expected an end to happen. It's really, really interesting, the position that a lot of these guys have taken is they decided to say it did, right, as believers. Most of them were Christians when they took this position because we had two choices. Jesus told the truth or lied. Well, our Son of God, or God in the flesh, if you're a Trinitarian and you believe and you have faith, he can't lie. So we ran to the position, it did happen. Now we're working backwards as we're not faithfully believing in the guy and believing in the text and the God of this book and books, if you will. Now we have to go, okay, did it really happen? It was expected to happen. We can go ahead and assume that the Synoptic Gospels do have their apocalypse idea attached, or this end with the signs coming and all that, with the destruction of Jerusalem. But does Paul have in mind the destruction of Jerusalem? Does Paul have in mind the synoptic apocalypse? Does Paul have in mind the same apocalypse as John, or the writer of Revelation?
Well, actually, if you think he wrote all of those epistles, there is a lot of common ground between the order of events between Thessalonians, the Olivet Discourse, and the book of Revelation. What's going to happen in what order? It's kind of surprising to see. But there are also big differences, too. It's like Paul... If the historical Paul lived and died when they say he did, he was dead several years before the fall of Jerusalem. Yet he expected the end to come in his own lifetime. Of course, he didn't know he was going to die. Oh boy.
You're fine. Nothing's fine.
He didn't know he was going to die, so he says then, or at all, he said, the dead in Christ will rise first, and then we who are alive and remain will be caught up with them, and so forth. So he expected it would be within his natural lifetime, though he died, according to the stories, a few years beforehand, so he didn't have to face the delay part. So we don't know what he'd have said about that.
But we have an implication in some of the epistles, there's a delay.
Yeah.
That's the problem that the full preterists do not accept. In fact, they date, like epistles like 2 Peter, they date them pre-70.
Yeah, there's not a chance with that, especially.
And if they don't date them, which the IOers will go, we don't care when it was written. 4th century doesn't matter, okay?
Oh, yes, it does.
Yes, it does. And that's why I think it's important. But they say, well, 2 Peter could have been written later. Doesn't matter. Still talking about the temple's destruction. The elements shall melt with fervent heat, all that kind of stuff. But there's the delay of the parousia, and that's why he's making his argument.
Yeah.
And they start doing that. That's not something they accept. And I think James Stewart Russell had a huge part in, I know that full preterists existed prior to him. There are documents in the 1800s of these people that became universalist and such.
Oh,
oftentimes
how interesting. Wow.
Yeah, there's a development of this position. However, James Stewart Russell made it very popular. This is one of the more well-known books on this topic. And it's used by many preterists today.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, I just figured we'd address some of that stuff because that's one of the things and the issues that are up on the menu right now, if you will, being discussed.
Well, plus, by the way, Revelation also expects an almost immediate coming, and you can pretty easily break down what they thought was going to happen very shortly. A Parthian invasion of Rome. That stuff didn't happen either, but it's very clear that they're not talking about literal dragons and all that stuff. The code is pretty easy to read once you do a little homework. And so, yeah, that fits in with some kind of preterism, that at least that's when they thought it was going to happen.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Price.
And by the way, I've written a story called The Seven Thunders, where Apollonius of Tyana meets with John on Patmos. And they're talking about somebody trying to bring about the end of the world. And at the end, Apollonius admits to his disciple that he is the second coming of Christ. It's a goodie. Margaret Barker loved it.
Really?
Yeah.
Go check it out. Joyce, thank you for the question. And I would continue reading and continue studying outside of just the IO paradigm, because I find it to be a black hole of kind of their own consensus, where if you don't agree with them, you're practically an idiot on these topics and don't really know what you're talking about when it comes to this subject matter. Everything harmonizes, and you better make sure the Bible interprets the Bible, and everything is going to fit that whole agenda of the Gentiles being the lost tribes, the whole nine. So keep on studying, because I will be having experts like Ophir and Rosensvee on the show who know the terms in their original languages, and they will talk about Paul's Gentiles. We'll find out who they are
that's
soon.
That's going to be interesting.
It will be very interesting, because now you're practically saying to the people that are absolute experts in the world, you're an idiot and you're wrong and you don't know your Bible. At that point, you got to kind of stop and realize this is absolutely anti-academic.
Yeah, that's where Richard Carrier is unfortunately correct, that this is crankish. I don't mean to insult the individuals who do it, but there is such a thing as crank use of the Bible, as you see in different cults and stuff like that. And that's what they're doing. They need to do a lot more studying of a lot of things vis-a-vis the Bible before they have the right to an opinion like this.